The match won't light. Third one now. Why is it so cold in here? The wood's still stacking high. Fire should be roaring. There's something in the chimney. There's something sitting right up in the throat of it, waiting. Now, let me take you back a piece. Before the cold got so particular, before I understood what my grandmother meant when she'd say, "Don't let the fire go out till spring." Not because of the cold, Lord, no. We knew cold. We were mountain people. Cold was just another neighbor, ornery and familiar. She meant something else by that. There is a hollow, and I won't name it because some hollows don't like being named after dark. There is a hollow about 11 miles yonder from the last good road, up in the crease between two ridges that lean into each other like old men sharing a secret. My family's been up in that hollow since before anyone thought to write such things down. The cabin there, my grandfather's grandfather's work, sits low to the ground, log and chinking. One big room, a sleeping loft above, and a hearth. A great, wide, deep hearth, nearly the full width of one wall, built from creek stone and river clay and 3 generations of careful tending. That hearth was the heart of the place. You understand? Not the walls, not the roof. The fire. The fire was the cabin's pulse. And my grandmother, small woman, sharp eyes, didn't waste a word in her life. She sat me down when I was 7 years old, maybe 8, and she told me the rules. Not ghost stories, rules. She held my face in both her hands so I'd look at her and not off yonder at something more interesting. And she said, "First, you do not let the fire die between October and the last frost of March. Not for one night. Not one. Second, if you wake and find the room cold, colder than it ought to be, even with a low fire, you do not get up. You do not cross the room. You pull your blankets up and you wait for the light. Third, you do not look up the chimney, not in the dark, not ever." I asked her why. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Because something lives in the cold places, and it finds its way in through the throat of a dead fire." She called it the Hearth-Eater. Some of the older folks up in the hollow, they had another name for it, the Soot Man. But my grandmother didn't use that name. She said naming it too precisely was like leaving the door open a crack. I'm going to tell you about the winter I was 34 years old. The winter I went back to that cabin alone. The winter, I forgot the rules. It was the first week of December. I'd driven up as far as the truck would take me, then walked the last 2 miles in through snow that came up past my boot tops. Backpack, enough food for a week, a bottle of good whiskey I never ended up opening. The cabin had been empty for 3 years since my uncle passed, but it was solid and always was. Those old builders, they didn't have much, but they had patience and they had pride. And those 2 things make something that lasts. I got the fire going easy enough. There was wood stacked under the lean-to out back. Good, seasoned hardwood, oak and hickory. Enough to see out the month. I stuffed the hearth and lit her up, and inside of an hour the cabin was warmer than I had any right to expect. I made soup on the little cast-iron camp stove I'd brought. I read for a while. I felt for the first time in a long time something like settled. I did not think about my grandmother's rules. I slept well that first night. It was the second day that things started being off. Small things. The kind of things you argue yourself out of. I noticed the windows first. Now, it was cold outside. Below freezing, I'd reckon. And the kind of cold that has teeth. You expect some frost on the inside of single-pane glass. You expect it. But this was different. The frost on the inside of the east window, the one nearest the chimney wall, was thick. Thicker than the others by a good measure. And it wasn't the feathery, fern-like frost you see when moisture just settles and freezes pretty. It was flat, compressed, like something had been pressing against the glass from the inside. I stood and looked at it for a while, rubbed it with my thumb, and it scraped off in a sheet. I told myself, old glass, thin spots, cold coming in around the frame. I put another log on the fire and did not think about it further. That afternoon, maybe 2, 3 o'clock, that low gray winter light that makes everything feel like it's already dusk, I became aware of a smell. Wet ash. Now, a wood fire doesn't smell of wet ash. A wood fire smells of smoke and resin and living warmth. Wet ash is the smell of a fire that's been doused, the smell of a hearth left cold and rained into. But my fire was burning. I could see it. Good flames, steady draw, the wood catching clean. I leaned in close and sniffed. The fire itself smelled right. But just behind me, just at my back, I'd have sworn, was that cold, silted cellar smell. wet ash, dead fire. I turned around and the room looked the same as it always did. The light the same, the air the same, but the smell didn't fully leave until close to evening. The cat, I should mention the cat. My uncle had kept a barn cat, old Orange Tom, name of Persimmon, which suited him because he was wrinkled and surly and had about him the look of something that had been here longer than you had. After my uncle died, the neighbors 2 ridges over had taken Persimmon in. But that cat, stubborn as he was, had wandered back. He'd been sleeping on the porch when I arrived, like he'd been expecting me. I'd let him in. Persimmon was a hearth cat by nature. Old cats like warmth the way old men do, with an urgency that is less preference and more requirement. Every night of my life I'd seen that animal draped across the hearthstone like a rug, tail twitching slow, eyes half shut in a private ecstasy. On the second evening, he wouldn't go near it. He sat in the dead center of the room and watched the hearth. Just watched it. Not sleeping, not comfortable. His ears were back, not flattened like a fighting cat, but low, uncertain. The way an animal looks when it can't decide whether to run. I called him over. He came to me, pressed up against my leg, hard, like something looking for a wall to stand against. But his eyes stayed on the fire. No, not on the fire. Above the fire. Up at the dark place at the top of the firebox where the smoke curls inward and the throat narrows and you can't quite see what the chimney holds. That night I woke at, I reckon it was 3 in the morning, maybe just before. The deep of it, that hour with no name. I woke because I was cold, not the gradual creeping cold of a fire burning low. This was different. This was the cold of a room that had never been warm, the cold of a root cellar, the cold of stone that hasn't seen sun since it was quarried. I lay still. The fire was still going. I could see the light of it moving on the ceiling, orange and copper and low. The logs were there. The wood was catching. There was no reason, no earthly reason, for the room to be this cold. And then I remembered. Pull your blankets up and wait for the light. My grandmother's voice, clear as if she'd spoken it right there in the dark. I pulled the quilt up to my chin and I lay very still. The fire moved. The shadows moved with it. Persimmon was not on the bed. He'd been on the bed when I fell asleep, curled against my feet in that imperious way of his. He was not there now. I did not move. I listened. There is a sound a fire makes when it is healthy. You know it without knowing you know it. A low crackle. The occasional pop when a pocket of sap meets the heat. A breathing sound almost, the draft pulling up through the chimney like slow lungs. There was no sound like that. The fire was moving. I could see it, silent and wrong. The flames low and sideways, bending toward the room instead of up, like something above them was pulling the heat back down, like something above them was drawing on it. I don't know how long I lay there. Long enough that the cold became something I could almost hear. A high, thin, interior silence, the way silence sounds when all the warmth has been removed from it. At some point I became aware of the smell again, stronger now. Wet ash, and below it something else, something older, like the smell inside a well, like the smell of a place that has been sealed and dark for a very long time. The shadows on the ceiling shifted, not with the fire, against it. A movement up near where the chimney breast met the ceiling, slow, like ink dropped in water, like smoke running the wrong direction. A shape that wasn't quite a shape, that your eye wanted to make into something and then couldn't hold. I did not move. I kept my eyes soft, not staring. You don't look directly at some things. You let them exist at the edge of your sight where the naming of them can't get a purchase. My grandmother had known this. I understood the rules now, not as superstition, not as old woman's worry. I understood them the way you understand the rule about standing back from a cliff's edge, not because someone tells you, because your body knows. The cold deepened for a moment, just a moment, sharp as held breath, and then it began, very slowly, to recede. I do not know what it does with the heat it takes. I do not know where it goes, when it goes. I know that my grandmother never told me how to drive it out, only how not to invite it in. I know that it did not touch me in that cabin, lying still in that cold room, with the quilt pulled up and my eyes cast soft toward the ceiling. I reckon it came close, though. I found Persimmon the next morning under the bed, unhurt, eyes wide. He ate 3 days' worth of food that morning, like something that had been too frightened to eat in the night. I understood that. Here is what I want to tell you. When morning came, real morning, gray and cold and honest, I went to the hearth. The logs I'd laid on a night before, Good thick oak logs that should have burned 4 or 5 hours easy. They were there, whole, barely touched, but the heat was gone from them. Not burned out, not exhausted, gone. Like something had reached into the wood and drawn the warmth straight out of it, the way you'd draw marrow from a bone. The logs sat in the firebox, gray and cold and perfect, untouched by flame, full of wood, empty of everything that makes a fire burn. I sat with that for a while. And I went out to the lean-to and I split fresh wood. I laid a new fire. I lit it clean with good dry kindling and one of my last matches. And I watched it catch and build until the room was warm again. And I did not let that fire go out. Not for the remaining 5 days I stayed in that cabin. I woke up at 2 in the morning to feed it. I slept light and kept the wood close. On the last morning, before I walked out, I banked it careful. Enough heat to last a full day and a half. It wasn't superstition. It was respect. My grandmother used to say that the old things in these mountains, the things that were here before the first family came up through the gap with their tools and their seeds and their fire, they don't hate us. That's important to understand. They don't hate. They're just hungry. And they come where it's cold, and they stay where the fire dies. The Hearth-Eater, the soot man, he's not a devil, he's not a ghost. He's something older than either of those words. He's a hollow thing, a cold thing. Something that was here when the mountains were young and had no name. Something that learned early that living things make heat, and that heat is, to him, what the warm wood is to the fire. Sustenance. There are cabins in these hollows, empty ones. The kind that fell into abandonment when the last family moved off to the towns looking for work, leaving the ridge behind. There are cabins up there where the fireplaces haven't been lit in 30, 40 years. I don't go in those. I know what tends to settle in a cold chimney. I know what finds a cold hearth and calls it home. So, if you are in a place tonight that is warm, if there is heat in the walls and light by the bed, and all the ordinary sounds of a house going about its ordinary business, then you rest easy, friend. The cold things come to cold places. And warmth, real warmth, the warmth you carry in you even now, even as you feel your eyes growing heavy and your breathing slowing, and the weight of the day falling off you like a coat at the door. That warmth is its own kind of protection. My grandmother used to say, The fire doesn't just warm the room. It tells everything outside the window, everything in the hollow and up the ridge and down in the cold black places between the stones. It tells them all that someone is home, and that they are tended, and that they are not leaving. So let the warmth come up through you now. Let your hands grow heavy. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breath come slow, slower than that. There is a fire somewhere in the old part of you. You've had it since before you were born. Something passed down along the line, from one set of hands to the next, the way my grandmother passed her rules to me, and the way her grandmother passed them to her, all the way back to the first person who ever sat before a fire in the dark and understood, bone deep, that the fire meant safe. That's still true. The cold things are out there, sure enough, up in the hollows, down in the crawl spaces, drifting along the ridge lines in the black hours before the gray of morning comes creeping up from the east. But they are not here. They are not here with you. You rest now. You let the warmth have you. Don't let the fire go out. And don't look up the chimney.